And I left there in May of '70 to go to Vietnam. Yeah, he hit me right in here, in my thigh area, and he just tore me all the way down. That's when I went into Special Forces.
You can't just go in and say, I want to be Special Forces, right?
Well, I did.
Guard Special Forces groups, the 19th and the 20th.
There was a recruiting poster up there for York City Police. And I said, wow, I think I'm going to join that. I was in a ditch beside the runway. And I laid there for a while, and I thought, I'm going to be crippled for the rest of my life now.
There was actually children involved with this.
There was children. Some of the Cambodia was the worst.
Really?
Give me a minute.
Yeah.
We were in Cambodia.
Sitting here with Mike Albert. He was a U.S. Army Green Beret with the 20th Special Forces Group, a York City police officer, a private detective, and he worked in anti-human trafficking in the Philippines for some time. He dedicated his entire life to serving his country and his community, even after retiring when he then became a mayor. So Mike, thanks for talking to me. Your family moved to Maryland, born in Carlisle, moved to Maryland, and decided at that point that you wanted to go into the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually left high school to go into the Navy. And how long were you in the Navy?
Just a year.
Okay.
I went in between my junior and senior year.
Okay.
Because it was a reserve. And I spent that year in my senior year on a destroyer escort that was stationed in D.C.
So you decide then to get out of the Navy, you want to go into the actual Army, and it's 1970, so...
Well, that would have been, at that time it was 1967, yeah.
Oh, 67. You
Yeah.
went, okay, wow.
I went in what you call airborne unassigned. So I was guaranteed to go to jump school at any time, but then I would go as the needs of the Army. So at the time I was talking to the recruiter, I had told him, I said, I have this love for tanks. I idolized General Patton,
Yeah.
I had uncles that served with him, and he was the guy. I said, so I think I'd like to try out tanks. And of course, the recruiter leans across the desk. He said, son, you ever see a tank fall out of an airplane? No. Even in the movies? No. He said, you're right. He said, if you go armor, you're not going airborne.
Oh.
Okay. So I said, well, whatever. And then anyway, they put me in the military police. So they kind of like, okay, well, maybe this is where I'm heading, because long time ago when I was a very little boy, we went to one of these little highway restaurants. I don't know what you would call them. And I was with my mother, my dad, and I was in there, and it was up northern Pennsylvania. And these two giant troopers came in, and I was in awe of them. And apparently at one time I said, I want to be like them, and said, yeah, okay. So anyway, it kind of just stuck in my mind. And I think maybe when I grow up, I'll be a cop. But that kind of,
was already in your head.
Yeah, I was a little kid, but it wasn't, it was just a little kid talking, because they looked so cool.
Yeah.
They were so big, and I wanted to be big like that. And it's like, these were like probably coal miner Polacks up there in northern Pennsylvania or something.
But you would decide to go in as airborne originally.
Yeah, I wanted to go in, and I went in, and I got injured, and they wanted to put me in I forget what the name of that was, recycle type thing. It was a company, and I decided, I'm not going to be here and do details and heal up. I said, can I just go to another unit? They said, yeah, we can send you. So I ended up in Korea.
Oh, okay. So wait a minute. So you went in as airborne, but you ended up going into MP.
Yeah, well, that would have been my MOS. Airborne would have been, in addition to that, I would have been in a airborne military police company, probably in the 82nd Airborne Division. And then I went to military police school and then jump school, and then I was supposed to be in the 82nd, and then I went over to Korea because I didn't finish. Well, after Korea, I was sent to Fort Monroe, Virginia. And that was kind of like a nice duty station, basically a peninsula, and it was actually, most of the stuff there was handled by the FBI, since it was a government, federal government organization. So I was there for a year. I got there in December of '68, and I left there in May of '70 to go to Vietnam. So I was there that whole time.
Okay. So you spent a year in Vietnam as an MP.
Dog handler.
Oh, dog handler, that's
Yeah.
right. I've been hearing a lot of stories lately about canines in Vietnam. I mean, I heard they were so vicious. I don't know if this is true or not. They're so vicious, they actually had to put them all down before they came back. Was that?
Yeah, and that was the sad part, because when we were over there and they were active, they were essentially just like police dogs here. They were active duty, Army entities, so to speak. They had a lot of privileges in the way. I've even heard stories, I've never witnessed it myself, where they have actually been in contact with the enemy. They were wounded, GIs were wounded, not very seriously, but they would pull the GIs off and put the dogs on there and have them sent out. Now, again, like I say,
Wow.
I hadn't vetted it, but that was a story going around.
Yeah.
And but yeah, they were vicious. And backing up to Korea is when I went to dog school. When I first got there, they sent me down to a unit in a place used to be called Taejon. It's now called something similar to that, but it's not the same place. And they had a nuclear storage area down there built into the mountains. They were all just bunkers inside the mountains. And they sent me down there, and they said, look, we have openings for dog handlers. We need dog handlers. Would you be willing to go? I said, yeah. I said, I don't want to sit in a tower for 8 hours a day when I can out walk the dog. So they sent me to dog school. So when I'm in dog school, now these are vicious dogs. These are dogs that are trained, given to a handler. Let's say you get the dog, I come along, you're going back to the States, I get your dog. He has to be retrained over again because he doesn't know me.
Yeah.
So I was in school, I had this dog, and he wasn't eating. Something wrong with him, I don't know. So it's wintertime, and I mean, Korea, when it gets winter, it's like it was outside the last couple of days, maybe times 3 or 4. So I had this big parka on, I had all kinds of heavy clothing on, and I had my hands stuffed in my pockets, and I'm walking with my head down. Now the dogs are in a house that are suspended on a pole, so that they were chained on the pole, they could jump out the house, run around and get exercise and go back in the house. I wasn't paying attention. And the next thing I saw was canine teeth coming up here like this at me. And I backed off and I smacked him on the muzzle. He went down. As soon as he hit the ground, he went straight into my groin.
Oh.
If his chain had been an inch longer, my voice would probably be about a couple octaves higher right now. Yeah, he hit me right in here in my thigh area, and he just tore me all the way down. He just went like this. Now I had heavy clothing on, which was what saved my leg.
Were they the Belgians?
They were German Shepherds.
Oh, they're straight
Yeah,
German.
now I'm not remembering what this one was. There was a mixture of dogs, but most of them were Shepherds. Long story short, they took me to the hospital, and I remember the doctor coming in, taking a look at me. He said, I there's nothing there to sew together. He said, you're like mincemeat down there. He said, I'm going to have to just patch you up and let it heal. That's all we can do. So I was laid off for probably a good month before I could go back and really do anything.
Did you go back to the dogs?
I finished school. Yeah, I had a dog. I have a picture of him in there with me.
Yeah.
I'll show it to you later.
Yeah.
And did that. So that was my introduction. And when we had a couple dogs that had come from Vietnam to Korea, and they had to be put down because they were so vicious that no handler could handle them.
Yeah.
And then the dogs we had where we were at, they were just I considered them insane in some cases.
that
The dogs,
right, really?
they were
Yeah.
focused on what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And they knew their handler, they loved their handler. There was no issues there, but anybody else came around,
Wow.
you had to be careful.
Yeah, like I said, I heard stories of the war dogs of that period, and I guess they were sending them down in holes even after some of the
they had-
Vietnamese in the holes.
Yeah,
Can you imagine when
they
those
had
dogs coming
that-
down after you.
dogs that did tunnel work.
Yeah, tunnel work.
Tunnel dogs. Yeah.
So you end up, you go from Korea, you go into Vietnam for a year, and then you end up in Germany.
Yeah.
You're running MP there at the wall for 4 years.
No, I did that probably for 2 years, and then 2 years I was investigations.
So then you think it was 74 that you ended up back in the States?
74, I ended up back in the States, in Maryland, worked some security jobs there. Then we went out to Texas, and then from Texas back to Germany as a civilian. And I was over there probably another 2 years, maybe a little bit longer.
And you were running a restaurant at that point?
And yeah, I had just a small little restaurant. I served, everybody had pizza places. I served American food, deep fried trout, fried chicken, French fries. And so I didn't have any problems with customers from GIs, because I'm tired of eating pizza after a while. And
where was that at in Germany?
That was in Berlin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was right across from where I was stationed at, actually, for. We call it Andrews Barracks. It's Andrews Kaserne, is in the German. And it was, the Andrews Kaserne was, actually, if you research it, it was a big place for the SS during the war. Oh. And it was a school and just everything. They had a big pool in there, which they would occasionally drain it and shoot people and whatever. But so that's still there. It now belongs to the German government, and they have a museum there. Then the relationship sort of went sideways, and I said, well, I'm going back to the States. And I went back to the States, and there was still really not a lot going on, but I worked in a factory back in Carlisle.
But you said, but in that period, you were thinking about getting into policing.
Yeah, I was, and it was a no-go still. I went even Maryland, I looked Pennsylvania, just nobody was hiring. So I did go back in the Army. That's when I went into Special Forces.
I mean,
you
can't just go in and say, I want to be Special Forces, right?
Well, I did. I did. And that story goes back because if we have time, just a really short. When I was in jump school the first time, okay, there was a guy and they were recruiting for Special Forces. Well, you got to figure, at that time period, I was probably just 6 feet, and I probably weighed 145 soaking wet. Okay, not your image of a a Green Beret, so to speak. So anyway, we went through, we did the training and all that stuff, and the recruiting training, and the guy said to me, the recruiter, he says, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 18." He said, "Well, you have to be 19 to join." I said, "Well, I'll be 19 in January." He said, "Yeah, that's not going to work, and so you're going to have to come back." So in the meantime, I got injured. I left jump school, and I just kind of forgot about it. Oh. So now here we are 10 years later, and I'm in the recruiting office. I said, "I want to go back in the Army." He said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be in Special Forces. I wanted to do that a long time ago." And he says, "You're in luck." He says, "They're recruiting straight from the street now."
Really?
I go, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, sign here." So I had to go to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. That's where I was. Okay. 2 weeks, what they called Minuteman training. They get you reoriented into the Army and all that stuff. And so I had started over at the E2, and I went from there. I went to jump school, finished. I went to infantry school, go into what they called SF company, and that was kind of like your filter.
Oh, yeah, I guess you're not assigned to a unit.
No, you're not even trained. You're not even trained. Yeah. You finished, like I said, I finished infantry school, finished jump school, and I was qualified to go. Everything was passed, and so I was qualified to go in. I still had to make it through SF company to be able to go to the course. It's like the Rangers, they have to go through the training period to see if they're fit to go into the course and they can make it and all that stuff. So I went through that, went into training, passed all that, went into training and started Special Forces training. And then when I graduated, it's kind of funny because later on I went back to be the NCOIC, or the head trainer of SF company.
Really?
Yeah, so then I was in charge of all these guys coming in and getting them squared away and all that.
Man, so tell me about the training getting in there.
Well, it was broken down into 3 phases. Phase 1 was your initial kind of stuff, and we went out to a place called Camp McCall, which had been there since World War II and been utilized since World War II. We just learned the basic stuff. about special forces, about map reading and caching stuff in the forest and so forth, basic survival. You know, if we were successful in phase 1, then we would come back. I think we had a downtime for just a week or so. Then we went to phase 2. Phase 2 at that time was our MOS. Okay, I was weapons. I wanted to be in weapons, and there was communications. There was engineering. There was medics, and so we each had our own different schools that we went to. The medics was by far the longest. They were sent down to Texas, and where they went through this really intense medical school, and then they had stuff also in Fort Bragg where they went as well. The engineers went back out to Fort Leonard Wood, and they learned engineer stuff, how to build stuff, but also how to blow it up. They did a lot of extensive work with explosives and so forth.
Yeah.
So anyway, I stayed at Bragg to go through the weapons course.
Okay. So what was that all about? I mean,
Well, we had to learn 51 different weapons, and they were still utilizing at that time. There wasn't a big transition. I mean, we were still somewhere in between World War II and Korea and, Vietnam and that type of thing. So we had all those European weapons and German weapons and whatnot that we had to learn.
So it wasn't just U.S. weapons?
No, we had, because of the fact that Special Forces at that time, I can't speak for them now, but I'm sure it's the same, the mission's the same, we were force multipliers. So we were trained up. We were trained to be trainers. So we would go into a foreign country and we would train them in whatever specialty we had so that they would be better equipped to handle whatever it was, and then we'd kind of link up with them, so to speak. To do that, we had to know all these weapons because we might encounter somebody that's carrying an M1 Garand or some kind of German, K98 or something. We had to be familiar with those weapons.
Wow.
And that meant, at that time, the M1 Garand and the M14 were almost identical weapons, okay? We had to break both of those rifles down, put all the parts in a box, shake the box up, dump it out on the floor, and we had to put them back together again. We were timed to do that.
Really?
Well, we had a familiarization, time period before that. It wasn't just, here's 2 rifles, put them. We had all the parts on the floor. We just had to pick out, okay, this looks like something in an M1,
Is that right?
And
really?
we put them all together.
Jeez.
But it was one of those things. It's like we were saying, what do we have to do? What's this about? Well, you might be in a foreign country, and you might run into this. You might run into some of these guys might have a broken down M14 or broken down M1 Garand, and they're trying to make them work, and they don't work, and they don't understand why. You have to know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
So that was probably, in my estimation, probably the hardest part of that course.
So you didn't have any problems with the physical part of it?
No, the physical part was a bear. I mean, they literally walked us or marched us or, I don't know, rucksacked us to death because we were, Fort Bragg's nothing but pine cones and sand.
Oh, yeah.
So we would go out in the fallout in the morning, and we had to have at least 40 to 45 pounds of rocks or something in our rucksack.
Jeez.
And then this little guy, I forget what his name is, he escapes me. But this guy, I don't think he was human, but he was like 5'7" or something like that, and he handled the rucksack marches. And he would always go down these trails where your sand is up to your ankles, and it's like, you're falling behind. Move it up. Let's go. Move it. And we're like dying back here, Sergeant.
Yeah.
But we had that kind of stuff, and then there was other things. We had to do virtually everything that we would have to do to train somebody else, and also to survive in that environment wherever they would send us, that type of thing.
But I mean, you probably had trainers, straight out of Vietnam, obviously, at this point. I mean, these are guys that had experience in war, in guerrilla warfare specifically. I mean, we had a lot of those guys, and they handled the part where, even in infantry school at Fort Benning,
they had guys there, and they had mock villages, and we'd have to patrol those villages. And as we go through, we'd learn things and get blown up and get shot and whatnot. But there was a learning process of everything. The same thing they had at Fort Bragg, and they would handle some of that training. I guess their incentive was to keep you alive, so to speak. It was good. It was good training.
So what unit did you go into then after the training?
Well, after that, I was supposed to be going to the 7th. Our whole group that we came in together were supposed to be going to the 7th Special Forces. I got taxed with going to the Institute for Military Assistance to be a trainer, and so that's where I stayed. And then I was there for, I think, 2 years. In that meantime, I had decided my greatest desire was to be a helicopter pilot.
Oh, really?
Okay, because I seen these guys in Vietnam, and they were just like one with the machine, so to speak. They just,
guys,
they're there.
Yeah.
And at that time, they were really building up the Special Forces side of the 160th Special Forces Aviation Unit, and so they were looking for helicopter pilots. So I took the written test and passed. Didn't do real good I did good, but not good enough on the fixed wing, but I did really well on the helicopter. So I went in and took the physical, passed the physical, and all the other interviews and everything that you had to go through, and just sat back and was waiting on that to come through.
But by the close of the games, the mood was jubilant. Eric Hayden and the United States hockey team became America's heroes, and by now the tiny village of Lake Placid, New York was receiving
I get a letter from the Army saying, "Oh, congratulations, Sergeant Albert. You're one of the top 10 NCOs in the Army, and we want you to be a recruiter."
Oh.
And at that time, you were either going to be a recruiter or you were going to be a drill sergeant. And I says, "I want to be a drill sergeant. If you're going to make me do this, I want to be a drill sergeant. That's where I'm oriented to. I'm not an office guy."
Yeah.
And that went back and forth, and finally I got a letter from the general, and he said, "You're either going to be a recruiter or you're going to get out of my Army."
Oh, jeez.
So
'cause this was the time. What year was this?
This was 1980.
Yeah. So there wasn't. There was really nothing going on as far as conflicts are concerned. So
No.
So when you went back into training, was it before that period? And were you at Fort Bragg?
Yeah, I was at Fort Bragg.
So you were down there training at Fort Bragg?
in SF Company, the company where everybody comes in at.
Oh, wow.
And we ran all the training, all the physical PT, and then we were in classrooms all day. We'd mess with them and stuff like that to see where they were at.
Yeah.
And we just did all the things that everybody did to us when we went through.
Wow. So were you specifically training in weapons at that point?
Yeah, I was.
Or did you do anything else, or was it mainly centered around weapons?
Backing up a little bit, before I made it to SF Company, and I had an opportunity to go to sniper school. I said, "Yeah, I'll take it." They said, "Well, we got an opening, go to it." So I went there, graduated, came back, and that's when I ended up in SF Company too. So I was angry because here I had undergone all this training and stuff like that, and then they wanted me to go be a recruiter. I wasn't seeing it the Army way, so I was a knucklehead.
What'd you do?
I got out.
You just got out at that point?
I got out.
1980.
And that time I went back to Carlisle. I went to the unemployment office, and there was a recruiting poster up there for York City Police. And I said, "Wow, I think I'm going to join that." And I said, that's my opportunity now. People at the unemployment office said, "No, you got to read the fine print there. They're looking for minorities. You're not a minority." I said, "I don't care. I'm going to go still. I can still take the test, can't I?"
Right.
"Yeah, you can go. You can still do that. But you're not going to go anywhere. So, come on back and we'll put you back in the factory." It's like, okay. So I went and I took the written test and passed. I took the physical and passed that, and I was accepted. There was 6 of us. I think there was 6 of us taken on at that time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, so that was it. That's how you got into New York City.
Yeah.
And what year was that?
That was 1981.
1981, you went to New York City.
Yeah.
What was the testing process like then? Was it a consortium where like a bunch of people showed up to test for it? And how many people would have been there?
No, I don't exactly remember how many people were there. There was a good amount of people there. but it wasn't a consortium like they do now. It was the individual. York City put on their own training.
Oh, okay.
Their own testing and so forth. So
Okay. So it was a written test and then a PT test.
PT, sort of like, going around in the gym and different obstacles and things like that.
So what was the academy like then? Was it still in Harrisburg here, or?
No, I went through the State Police Academy.
Oh, okay.
Because at that time they were, they had the state police and then they had the municipal side of it, but they were troopers who trained us.
Oh, really?
For the most part.
Was
yeah,
it the same
troopers.
place than the State Police Academy is
Yes.
at now? Really?
Yes.
How long was the academy at that point?
I think it was 20 weeks.
And how long was the FTO program?
It was, I believe, 18 months.
Were you familiar with York at all, or is that a total new city to you?
Totally new to me at all. I mean, I'd never been in it. In fact, it was funny because when we went to the academy, troopers up there kept saying, you guys are crazy for wanting to be down in York. By the time the academy was over, we think we were going to the Wild West.
Right.
So we didn't know what it was like,
How was it working down there?
It was nice. It was kind of like old school in a way because depending on who your training officer was, that they would either talk to you or they wouldn't talk to you and just tell you to sit there and shut up and just learn.
Just to watch?
Okay, but what if I have a question? Shut up. Some of them were like that.
Yeah.
Of course, I came with the experience of being a military policeman, so I knew the basics and that
That's
type
true.
of thing. I just
Yeah.
had to learn how to put it in the civilian world and so forth. There's a big learning curve as far as that goes, a lot of differences.
What was the worst of the cases you saw down there?
Probably the very worst two cases I had, and they were both when I was leaving the department, that end of my career there. One was a fatal accident, which was up on South George Street. And the other one was a suicide on the east end of town. A kid, and I didn't know at the time when I walked in on it until I did some investigations who he was. It was a kid that I had talked off a roof like about 6 years prior to that.
Yeah.
And he was going to kill himself. He was just a young kid then. I think he was 14 or 15 at that time. And so I went in and to this scene. It was a suicide, but it was an accidental suicide because he had been arguing with his girlfriend. He said, well, I'll show you. And he grabbed a double-barrel shotgun and put it underneath his chin and pulled the trigger. Well, he thought it was empty.
Oh.
And it wasn't. So those are probably, in the scheme of things, my worst.
Yeah.
It just seemed like in York City, there was different classes of people. We used to say, in the daytime, you have Class A. They're going to work and they're doing the normal stuff. 5 o'clock, they leave. Then Class B comes out. They're kind of rowdy, but they're not so bad. They're, and then they leave. And then at midnight, the real bad guys come out.
Yeah.
They have the most problems and stuff like that. I was working the loop one night, and I pulled over this young girl for doing stupid stuff like people did on the loop.
Wait, what's the loop?
Huh?
What's the loop?
The loop was Market and Philadelphia Street, and it was Saturday night and Friday nights. It was just
so it's kind of like the
constant.
circuit down there.
Yeah, the circuit.
Yeah. Okay.
We
yeah.
called it the loop.
Oh, okay.
And so anyway, I pulled her over, and she didn't really do anything bad. It was just something stupid. And I started talking to her while I was waiting for her information to come back, and she noticed, I think I had a Special Forces ring on. She goes, were you in Special Forces? I said, yeah. And she said, well, my dad's a major in Special Forces. I said, really? She says, you might know him. And she mentioned his name, but I said, no, it's not familiar. I said, it's, don't remember that name. And I said, where's he at? And she said, well, he works in Baltimore. I said, Baltimore? I said, what Special Forces unit is in Baltimore?
Yeah.
She said, well, it's a 20th Special Forces Group. It's a National Guard unit. So I'm thinking National Guard, can't be National Guard. It doesn't sound, doesn't fit together. And she said, would you like to talk to him? I said, yeah, I would. And I told her, I said, you can tell him I left the 11th when it shut down. And I said, I'm kind of just hanging here and I'd like to get back into it, but I don't want to go back active full time. So a couple of days later, I get a phone call from this major, which was her dad. And he said, well, first, I want to thank you for pulling my daughter over for what she did. She told me. And he said, I thank you for not being too hard on her. He says, I also want to offer you, if you want to, we have a slot down here in the 20th. If you come down, I'll get you in.
It should be noted that 58% of the Army's Special Forces strength rests in reserve units. There are 2 U.S. Army Reserve Special Forces groups, the 11th and the 12th, and 2 Army National Guard Special Forces groups, the 19th and the 20th.
So I went down, met him, got involved with, being recruited again, and went in and just kind of stayed with them the whole time. I went in Charlie Company. There's Charlie Company and Bravo Company.
So you're doing that, and how does, so the National Guard's not like the reserves, like every other 1 weekend a month type thing, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, it's 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer.
Oh, okay.
But the thing that I found out with the National Guard, and I'm thinking, okay, National Guard, they don't really do that much, they just kind of hang out and whatever. But we did more stuff in the National Guard than we ever did in the reserves, and even on active duty, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff going on. And so it was pretty cool. And I think I was there. That was in 83, I think it was, somewhere in that time frame. I can't remember for sure. But in 84, we went to Portugal. Then we went over to Italy a couple times because they had airborne units stationed over there, and we would link up with them. And we were also linked up with the 10th Special Forces Group in Bad Tolz. That we trained in the mountains all the time, climbing, whatever you do in the mountains, everything, rappelling, whatnot.
Where'd you guys train around here then? Did you go to Baltimore for your
we
weekend a month?
We went all over. I mean, we would link up with the Coast Guard down there. We would do sea ops.
Oh, okay.
We would concentrate on training internationally type things. Like I said, we went to Portugal. We went over with a SEAL team to Portugal, and we were the first American units to be there since Reagan was in office. And so that was an experience in itself because the airborne was communist, the commandos were socialists, and they didn't really work together. But one year the socialists would be in charge, the next year the communists would be in charge. We don't know how that worked out, how that happened. But anyway, our company was divided up, and I was blessed to be with the socialists, with the commandos, because they were a bunch of good guys. The guys that went to be with the paracadistas, the paratroopers, they said, we won't ever do that again. They wouldn't talk to us. They wouldn't
really.
We would do training, and they would do the training, but there was no camaraderie like it was with the commandos.
Jeez, that's insane. So at some point you met
Phil Roberts.
Roberts. You met him and I guess told him about the 20th, right?
I went through the academy with his then girlfriend, soon to be wife, Sally, and then he was working in Red Lion, and
as an officer there.
And this was back in the early 80s, maybe. Yeah, it was in early 80s. So anyway, a couple slots opened up in the city because guys were always quitting. And so he came up, got one of them, and he was working there. He came to me and he said, I've been thinking about that I want to go and be in your unit. And he said, but I've never been in the military.
Oh, he had no military experience.
Wow. And I said, well, he was this young guy. He was, 20, just out of college. And I said, well, you're going to have to go through basic and your AIT and jump school and special forces training. I said, you're going to be going over a year. I said, a year solid training. I said, how are you going to do that? You're going to quit? He goes, no, they can't. If I go in the military, they can't fire me. So anyway, long story short, I took him down to the unit. He sat down with a guy down there and they went over everything, told him what the unit was about, what we did and so forth. And he said, okay. So he joined. They sent him away.
So, Phil, you were actually in training with him. You guys would go off on training missions together.
Yeah.
You said you had a story about you guys together over there.
Yeah, it was our last time really going out doing, we used to do recon, so to speak. Well, we were in Italy. We were going to be in the mountains and the road. We were overlooking the road in the area. A convoy of Russian trucks were supposed to come by at a certain time that military intelligence told us it was vital and we need to count those trucks and everything else we could find about it.
So this isn't training. This is an actual mission.
This is a mission.
An operation.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we went from where we were at in Italy and we flew nap of the earth, which is the plane literally flies as low to the ground as they can, and they come to trees and they go over in mountains, and so you it's one of those things where you're either going to throw up here after a while or you're going to sleep, that type of thing. Anyway, long story short, we're out there and we reached this area, and I have pictures back there. I can actually show you the difference. We got there, it was all nice and sunny and shine, and this is going to be easy. We're just going to dig in and we'll be able to see the road. The road was clear down there. There's no issues whatsoever. So Phil and I was doing intel and he was doing the demo stuff. And so we went down the side of the hill and we dug into the side of the mountain, and you can see in the pictures, we actually made us little lounges, the dirt, because
nice.
He's an engineer. He could do that kind of stuff. So we dug out. There's a big side of this hill and we put our sleeping bags in there, and we were just in there sitting like, this is pretty cool. Yeah, this is nice. And so when it came time to, we got to get set for such and such a time, the fog came in and it started to rain. We couldn't see anything. We couldn't even see probably 50 feet down the mountain, let alone see the road.
Yeah.
So we could hear traffic, but we couldn't see them, and it didn't do us any good. So we were stuck out there, and the rest of the unit was back about, I'd say, a quarter of a mile behind us. And
it was just you two out there.
It was just he and I out there, yeah. And so we kind of I would sleep and he would watch, and I would watch and he would sleep, whatever, hoping this fog would go away. And I was listening to, I had a small radio, so I couldn't speak Swiss, but I could understand German, so their language is pretty similar. So I would listen in the Weather Channel, try to see when this thing is coming and going. And maybe we could get an extension if nothing else. I got up and he says, I'm not ready to go to sleep yet. I'm just going to sit back. I said, okay, I'm going to go up here and see what's going on with these guys. They were gone. I went up there and it's like, where are they at? What happened? They left. I went back and said, hey, Phil, it's just you and me. He goes, well, yeah, I know it's you and me. I said, no, it's you and me. They're gone. He goes, what? I said, yeah. He said, what are you going to do? I said, we're going to stay. I don't know what happened to them. We're going to have to figure this out. And because we didn't have a point, at that time, we didn't have a pickup point, at least it wasn't relayed to us.
Right.
A pickup point where we could go to by, reading our compass and maps.
Yeah. So
we're back there and we're just kind of snuggled into our chairs trying to figure out what's going on. And here this guy comes out of the woodwork, he comes out of the woods. It was one of our guys. And he's wearing civilian clothes.
What?
I'm going, where'd you come from? Where are you guys at? He said, oh man, we got ran out. He said, we didn't bother with you guys because we knew that you were shielded. He said, but we had to leave the area. We thought for sure that they would, scarf you up. Said there was, German troops, and we assumed East German troops because we didn't know for sure where we were at.
Yeah.
He says, here, I brought back a bottle of beer.
What?
Where'd you get that from? We're in the middle of the mountains. He said, don't ask. He said, let's go. So there was another guy, the medic, he was there, came out, and I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 of us all total. And we took off, and, you know, they were going back to, he said, we're going to be picked up in such and such a time. We got to hustle. Kavanaugh or something like that. He didn't have any heavier clothes on than a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt or something. He got really cold.
Yeah.
So we had to stop probably 3 or 4 miles away, and Phil actually kind of saved his life, because he said, I'm going to put you in a sleeping bag and I'm getting in there with you.
Oh.
And he said, no, you're going to have to warm up.
Yeah.
Because your body, your core, the medic looked at him, he said, your core is too low. He said, you're gonna, you know, fall out.
Yeah.
So that was an incident there. So anyway, we made it back, then the chopper came in and picked us up and flew us out, but
Wow. Yeah. And this was where?
someplace in Europe.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
On those Black Forest down there. We had no idea really where we were at.
Yeah. So they just dropped you off and just
Yeah, they
told you
said,
to do
here's,
intel.
yeah, this is, we had the coordinates of the road and where we were supposed to be, and that's where we ended up, and we thought it was going to be an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, hey, it's good training. We can just ride it out, and, you know, and then that storm moved in, and it was like, oh.
You end up isolated out there.
But it was a learning experience. But it was,
Yeah.
you know, I think after Desert Storm, of course, they basically sent me home and said, you know, we'll get you a medical discharge and, you know, all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I got to a point where it's like, okay, I've got to make the decision. I love being a cop, and I've been here 10 years now. I could do another 10, but it was just, I don't know, I think there was 7 guys that quit within a frame, and I was
really?
one of them. Yeah,
Oh.
just,
Wow.
we're done.
You got out of policing totally.
I got out of policing total.
So what'd you do at that point then?
Just did our business, and that was it.
How long did you do that?
Until I got talked into going back into police work. One of the guys who had left York City had gone to Marietta, and he was over there, and they wanted to do the PR 24 training. They said, well, I know a guy who's an instructor, but he's not a cop any longer. I said, well, that's all right, you know, let's talk to him. So anyway, long story short, I took his slot. He wanted to go to Virginia, and so he talked me into going over there. I said, I'll train you, but I'm not going to. So I went over and did the training for him and stuff like that. And eventually they said, come on, you know, you join over here. All right. And I told my wife. That didn't go over well, but
Yeah, right.
because then she was left with the business to run pretty much and everything. But
So you ended up getting into Marietta PD, and this is before the transition to Susquehanna Regional, right?
yeah. We did that transition. Yeah.
Oh, you were there.
I
when
was
that
there
happened?
for it. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right. So how long were you with Marietta before that happened?
I was with Marietta from 1990. I went away to Desert Storm in the beginning of 1991, came back in summer. And so I was there until they switched over, which I think was 1996.
People never get the word. The fight isn't about oil. The fight is about naked aggression that will not stand. It was from Saddam Hussein that he was ready to pull out his troops in exchange for keeping some...
These are war games, the kind played daily in the desert to simulate combat.
You know, they said, I forget how the term they used, but basically our counting is off the books. You guys can buy what you want, civilian equipment. So we had Loa shoes, boots, and stuff like that, which at that time were like, you know, man, if you got Loas, you know,
right.
you're not eating anything but soup for the next 2 months. You know?
Right.
And so
yeah, I read that. I guess the Gulf War was one of the largest activations of the 20th Special Forces, and I guess they activated you guys, but it was so quick that, you know, a lot of you guys didn't get pulled into it, right? I mean, but some did get attached to the 7th, I guess.
Okay, I see what you mean. I think is what happened there is at the end of it. You know, you're right. We were all trained up. We were all fit to go. We went to Fort Bragg. We stood down at Fort Bragg, and we were waiting on orders to go get on the planes. And it's like the war's over. The war's over.
Yeah. What was it, like August to February or something? Like that?
Yeah. That was back in February, I think. Late February, everything ended.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what the heck? You know, we're not going to get to go over there.
Troops out in this area, but they did not have the capability nor the time to put in the barrier that had been described by Saddam Hussein as an absolutely impenetrable tank barrier that no one would ever get through. I believe those were his words. They went through the first barrier like it was water. They went across into the second barrier line, even though they were under artillery fire at the time. They continued to open up that breach, and then they brought both divisions streaming through that breach. Absolutely superb operation, a textbook, and I think it'll be studied for many, many years to come as the way to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, when we were here, we were 150 miles away from Baghdad, and there was nobody between us and Baghdad. If it had been our intention to take Iraq, we could have done it unopposed for all intents and purposes from this position.
And then this order came down, said they need some people to go work with the Kurds over there. Oh, it's like, yeah, okay, we're going.
Yeah.
And they, no, you're not. Well, why not? Well, because you're weapons. Well, so what? That's what I'm trained to do. They said, no, we're only sending medical guys to anybody who's a medic.
Yeah.
They can go over, or communications, they can go over. We'll send them. But any weapons or
explosives guys, yeah.
No, you guys can't go because you're considered.
Oh, that is interesting.
That class of people that they don't want armed people over there. And it's like, holy crap. So now what do we do?
I know, right? Yeah, what did you do?
They said, well, we'll find something. So we ended up staying at Bragg for a while. Like I said, we didn't really get home and get discharged until sometime in June, somewhere in there.
Oh, okay.
We just continued to do stuff down there at Bragg, and I guess they were waiting to see if things heated back up again. That was the thought.
Okay.
And at my time down there, I was working in Air Ops region, so we would coordinate any units that were going out into the field, and stuff like that, and we would play these war games and stuff like that. So
okay.
Did a lot of that.
But you got injured somewhere in there, so you're still working in New York City, and there's a parachute accident.
I had actually got injured in 1988.
What happened there?
Bad landing. I thought I thought the ground was there, and I loosened up to make my parachute fall, and it's just like I did it at the same time that all the air went out of my chute, and I just went like that down on my back, my buttocks and my back. And I laid there for a while. I was in a ditch beside the runway. And I laid there for a while, and I thought, I'm going to be crippled for the rest of my life now.
But it hurt that bad, or you hit that hard?
Well, see, that was the point. Then I remembered, my brain says, you're feeling pain. You're okay.
Oh.
And it's like, oh. So anyway, I laid there for a while and got up, got my chute, got it all up, and carried it back to where the point was, and everybody had already landed and went back to the pickup point.
Yeah.
And I come in there, and they said, where the heck were you at? Where'd you land? I told them, I said, wasn't far from here. I said, but I got hurt. I said, I got slammed into the ground pretty hard.
So you made it up. You managed to get up and get to where you had to go.
Right.
How far of a walk was that?
It was about a half a mile.
Oh, okay.
So they took me out to the doctors and the medic. He looked at me and he said, I don't think you broke anything. He said, you had a pretty bad fall, but he said, I think you're going to be okay. It's probably just a bad strain. Okay, doc, a bad strain, whatever. Yeah. So I went on, and I continued to do my mountain stuff. I continued to do PT.
Really?
We did all this stuff. I mean, it was going on long years. Now here it is, Desert Storm. We're called up. And all in this time frame, I have been dealing with pain. I've been dealing with back issues. I'm working as a cop. I'm wearing 40 pounds of gear on my waist. So we go to Fort Bragg, and we had to go through what they called a belt line. And it basically, you go to each station, and okay, your insurance is intact, and okay, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. Well, I got to the medical section, and the medic's sitting there. He says, well, I see you had a bad accident in 1988. He said, how are you? I said, well, outside of pain all the time. I said, I'm fine. I do all my stuff. I'm not, no issues me carrying a heavy rucksack, climbing mountains. I'm okay. He goes, no, you're going to have to go to a neurosurgeon and be cleared through this before you're sent overseas. Okay, whatever. So I remember back when we were gearing up, training up for to be activated. We went on a 25-mile road march. Well, at the time, my back went numb, and I had developed a lump in my right calf. But I continued to walk, and they wanted to know, you need to get on the Jeep. No, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm halfway through. I'm going to go. So I did it. Everything was good. No other issues. I took the rucksack off, and it was like, oh, that felt so good. And I let it go. So at the belt line, they sent me to the neurosurgeon. So I walked in over there, and he said, Sergeant Albert, let me ask you a question. I said, yes, sir. He said, do you have a lump in your right calf? I said, yes, sir, I do. He said, you have a broken back. No, I don't. He said, yes, you do. I said, no, sir, I don't. Yes, you do. I said, no, sir, I've been doing everything for, all these years. I'm fine. He said, who's the doctor in this office? You are, sir. He said, I'm going to put you on. I'll show you. And they gave an MRI or whatever they gave me at that time. And he said, you see this stuff here and in the middle of your back and your lower back and then below your lower back? And he says, those are all crushed discs.
Oh, wow.
He says, the only reason why you did not become a paraplegic is because your physical conditioning.
Really?
Your muscles kept everything intact.
Wow.
I said, what am I going to do now? He said, you're done.
Really?
I'm done. What do you mean I'm done? He said, no more jumping. He says, I don't care what SF does with you, if you want to be whatever. He said, but you're not jumping anymore. You're off the team. He said, and your A-team days are over with. So I went back to the unit, and a couple guys that had gone through similar injuries, but other parts of their body, they said, just tear the paperwork up and just come on back to work. I'm going, no, I don't think I can do that. I said, if I do and something happens, I said, I don't relish being in a wheelchair for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So that's how that sort of ended.
Jeez.
And then, of course, the word, because we had a guy, the chief has met him, Phil Roberts. He was in our unit too. He was working in New York City. And he had said about me getting injured. He thought I had gotten injured then at Bragg. And so everybody back here in New York City was thinking, oh, Mike Albert has a broken back. He's going to be crippled. And, this whole thing just went out of control. And I said, no, I'm fine. I just can't jump anymore. I'm done.
Yeah. Wow.
So
how many jumps did you have, you think?
A couple hundred, several hundred.
Is that right? That many,
yeah.
really?
I mean,
you guys are constantly jumping.
Jumped. Yeah, we jumped everything. I mean, we jumped equipment. We jumped static line. We even jumped without parachutes into the water.
Really?
Yeah, that's another story in itself. But when we were with the Coast Guard, we did waterborne operations, and basically they took us off out in a Huey. They would actually fly not more than 50 feet off the water. But as each man went out, the chopper got light. And I was always the last guy out because I was the team sergeant.
Yeah.
And so when I went out, we were maybe 100 feet in the air.
Really?
Yeah. And you come down and your feet, there's a way to do it. And you come down and you hit and you go under and you think you're never going to get up to the top again and stuff like that. But,
what the heck?
But so those things, we didn't really count those as jumps, but we did all kinds of jumps. We jumped from 600 feet. We did that in training, and that's barely you out the door. Your chute opens, and you're there almost.
Jeez.
And
600 feet. Yeah. What the heck? Did you jump after the accident?
Oh yeah, after the accident.
Yeah, after the accident.
Yeah, from 88 to 90.
Yeah, you jumped.
I kept jumping.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and I even jumped when I was in Portugal. I jumped with the command, the paracadistas over there. I got wings up there on the board.
You were still jumping.
Yeah, I still jumping because I didn't know any better. Nobody told me. I never went back to the doctor and complained about my back.
Yeah.
I took aspirin. I just went out and did what I was supposed to do. It wasn't really that bad when I was working in the city. I mean, it was an issue sometimes getting in and out of the car, but it didn't aggravate me. to a point that I said, I got something seriously wrong. I better go. And maybe Mr. Lughead here should have said, I'm going to the doctor because this is constant pain. After I got off police work over here and basically lost my job because of my back, then I went in and got my private investigator's license, got federal credentials to do work for them too on the side. And then we had that for a while, and then we went to the Philippines. So I kind of lost track.
Well, so you end up getting out of York City then, and Phil stays there at that point?
Phil stayed, yeah. He retired from there.
You got your private detective's license. So what was the process to get that?
Go down to the courthouse, fill out an application. Then the application would go into the district attorney's office, and then the district attorney would forward it to the courts. And then I'd have to go in before the judge and be interviewed by the judge. And they would ask, well, what's your intent? And they go over your qualifications, what you had for them. And I just said, well, I just feel like I want to do something different. I want to do the criminal stuff. I said, maybe looking for missing people and stuff like that, that type of thing. And I said, I've done that in the past. And I said, I just kind of have a knack for doing something like that. And they said, okay.
Is that a state license or a county license?
No, it's state.
It's state.
Yeah,
okay.
State. Yeah,
wow.
I could literally go anywhere I wanted to.
Is that right? Really?
I wasn't there as a private detective. This is coming out wrong. To get a case. And the reason why is because I was contacted not long after I had my license, posted it, sent out, hey, I'm new and I want some work and whatever. This guy called me up. He said, would you want to do federal investigations? I'm going, well, what are you talking about? He said, well, we're overloaded. And he said, we need guys with legit private investigative companies or licenses. And he said, you'll come down here. We have a training school, and you go through that, and then we give you a secure laptop, and you go out and whatever investigations we send you, whether they're background investigations or follow-up investigations, then you go out and do that. I talked over my wife, and I said, I'm going to go for it. Yeah. She said, okay. So I had to go down to Maryland. I think I was down there a week, and came back, and I had this really cool laptop that was just, integrated into the federal system, and, you couldn't play on it or anything. It was just strictly for that, and you bring it up, and, and it was a reporting system, and that's what you did. And then I just sat back, and then every so often I would get a secure package from FedEx, and it would have the investigations, whatever they were in there, and I would just finish those up, either background checks or going out talking to people on follow-up investigations, whatever they had. And the cool thing about it was I had federal credentials, but there was other guys that were in the class with me down there who had been private investigators longer. And they had already, done other investigations. And they had like FBI credentials and, these type of credentials over here for DNA. And it's like, how do you do this? He said, we just throw all the stuff in our briefcase, and whatever case we're working on, we get the proper credentials out. We go meet people, really? Show them our credentials. And I said, well, that sounds kind of weird. And he says, but, it was a decent job. I mean, I went all over the place, not just Pennsylvania. I went down into D.C. and Maryland and, other places and stuff like that, wherever the people lived. And did that, and then typed up all the investigations and stuff like that. And then they just, paid me once a month and whatever it was.
So what did you do after? How long did you do that, and then why'd you get out of it?
Well, I'm in my office one day, which was in my house, and my wife Lois, she comes in and she has a magazine, and she says, "Here, you got to read that article. It's a one ad for an investigator." I said, "Okay, I'll read it." 3 weeks later, I said, I guess I'll look at it. So it was for the International Justice Mission. And I read it over, and I thought, I'll see what they're about. So I called up the number, and the guy talks to me, basically gives me an interview over the phone. And he said, there'll be somebody else contacting you. I said, okay, that's good. And then this other guy calls me. He says, "Can you hear me?" I said, "Yeah." But he was a vice president in the company. And he says, "I'm in Thailand." He said, "I want to make sure you can hear me." I'm going, "Yeah, I can hear you." He said, "I went over all your stuff, blah, blah, blah." He says, "Would you be interested in going to India?" I said, "Nah, I haven't left anything in India. I don't really want to go to India. It's just not a place where I want to go."
Yeah, right.
He says, "Well, then let me name you another one." He said, "Would you want to go to the Philippines?" I said, "Sure, I'll go to the Philippines." I said, "What's entailed with this job? I don't know anything. I don't have any information." "Well, we can't tell you what we're doing right now over there, but we need people to do it.
Oh, geez.
And it involves human trafficking, and we have offices in Thailand and Philippines and South America, I think 5 or 6 South American countries." And I said, okay. So anyway, long story short, it was a process, and I had to go down there and sit through basically a 8-hour interview with one guy, and then for an hour, and then another guy for an hour, all the day, that one day.
Where was that at?
That was down in D.C. at the headquarters.
So, I mean, that's how you knew it was legitimate. You actually met face-to-face before you went over there.
Met face-to-face with them finally.
Interesting. Huh.
And so anyway, they said, okay, we'll call you. And so waited. It wasn't really had any big hopes on it. It just seemed to me that they were looking for somebody, FBI level stuff, maybe, not just basically street cop. But they called me a couple of days later and they said, "Well, if we're offering you the job as the director of police training."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, I thought this was an investigative job." They said, "Yeah, we have that job open, but you're more suited by your resume and by who we interviewed, that you're much better at being a trainer than you would be as an investigator. Your skills would be lost." He says, "That's what I'm trying to tell you." And
I mean, Green Berets, that's what you guys do, training, right? I mean, it's.
And I said, "Sure, I like to do that." He said, "What do you be? You would be the director of police training for the entire nation of the Philippines."
Wow.
And you would also back up Cambodia, and if you had to go to Thailand and stuff like that.
Huh.
He said, "But you would be the director, but you would be the main instructor." I said, "Wow." I said, "That's pretty heavy." I said, "That's a lot of responsibility." He said, "Yeah." He said, "But everything we learned about you and everything," he said, "we think that you can handle it." I said, "Okay." I said, "I'll take the job."
But they wanted you to move there, right?
They wanted me to move there. So we had just bought a house.
Oh, geez.
It was like 2 years old, and it was in a development over in Mount Wolf. So I went to her and I said, "Well, I called that number, and it looks like we're going to be going to the Philippines." She goes, "Okay." And so I went down to D.C. I think I was down there for a week of training. We had to go link up, and I linked up with the guy who was going to be the investigator. He was a investigator out in Washington State with the sheriff's department out there. And then aftercare director, she was there. She was Filipina American. And then we had a lawyer that was going to be the head of the office. Well, this lawyer here, he ended up being a total disaster, and they got rid of him after about a month we were over there. Once we got together as a group and everything, we got situated to go over, and then we went over. And Lois stayed back here because we had one child at home yet, and plus we had to take care of the house and all that stuff, get rid of that. That was sold. God's blessing on that, I think, because they just, it just happened too quick, too many things in steps,
Yeah.
Because she had said to me one day, we were on a walk. This was before I got accepted. And she said, "What would you say that if we just sold all of our stuff and went off and did what God wanted us to do?" I'm going, "Well, he hasn't talked to me yet, so, we'll see."
Yeah.
Well, then he did 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And I woke up and it's like, yeah. So I went over. And she was cleaning up back here and getting the daughter situated with, our daughter with her ex-husband and so forth. And then she just came on over, and we just we're over there for 4 years.
Jeez, 4 years. So that, what was the organization again?
International Justice Mission.
Okay. So were they actually involved in investigations, or were they just mainly a training operation?
No, they did actual investigations. They had undercover operatives.
Oh, is that right? Really?
Well, my partner Tate, he was the investigator. He developed assets from within the community over there, and then they would go out and do the investigations actually. And him and I would go undercover sometimes, and we would go to these clubs and so forth, and we'd kind of hook up with these prostitutes, like, and just sit with them and talk to them and act like we were interested and start asking them idle questions. And they were giving us information. They didn't know what they were doing. So we got in a jam one night. It was so funny because this is really hilarious. We went out one night, went to this club, and we met these two young ladies. And so we were talking to them, and somebody came over and said, "Are you going to buy those girls, or are you going to leave?" And we were starting to get some good stuff from them. I said, "We'll buy them." So we paid for them. And he said, "Bring them back when you're done." Okay, so we left. And we went out, and our taxi was waiting for us, an undercover cop. And we got in a taxi. I said, "You girls hungry?" "Yeah." "You like to have McDonald's?" "Yeah." So we went down. They took us down to McDonald's. Now this is like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Filipinos don't sleep because it's too hot over there.
Oh, is that
so
right?
they'll sleep when they can. Then they'll be out all night. They'll do whatever.
Oh.
So we take these two girls to McDonald's. We buy them food, and it's a 2-story building. So we go up on the second floor. There's a group of Filipinos over here at a table, and we didn't pay any attention to them at all. And both of us are fairly new to the Philippines, of course. So we sat there, I think, for an hour and a half with them, just getting all the information we could. They were scared to death. And we told them, we said, "Look, we're not here to do anything with you. We're not going to take you to a hotel, and we're not going to rape you. We're not going to have you do anything." Because we found out that these girls had just been trafficked. And so everything was new to them. And it's another story, but the way they run things with the trafficking victims. And so we got all the information we could. It was good information. So we left, took them back to the club, dropped them off, and paid them, and left. So that was on a Saturday night. Sunday morning, Lois and I, we go to church. We found ourselves in a Filipino church, and we go into church, and it's in a movie theater in the mall, and they had the church before the theater opened up. So we're going in the line, and this guy was standing there, and he's pastor. He says he knew us. I mean, we had met him before. We'd had Bible studies with him, and he said, "Mike, where were you at last night?" "Why?" He said, "Well," and Filipinos are blunt. He said, "I'm pretty sure I saw you and Tate out with 2 young ladies."
Oh, jeez. So he didn't know what you did.
McDonald's. No, he didn't know what we did because we didn't tell anybody what we did over there. And I said, "Well, we were working." He said, "Uh-huh." And Lois was there. She goes, "I know where he was at." And she related the story. And he looks at her, he goes, "What?" I said, "Come here, we have to tell you what we do."
Oh, yeah.
He was with that group of people over there in the McDonald's. He saw us bring these 2 prostitutes in. They were clearly prostitutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And he thought we were out running the game. So yeah. And I said no. And after that, we always laughed at that after a while.
So you guys were you guys are linked up to law enforcement, but I mean, there was obviously corruption with the.
There was major corruption. It was so bad not to go into a long detail, but I would give the classes. Tate would prepare the investigation. All that's ready. He would set up the raid to the club, and then we call everybody in, all the players, And I would give my spiel, he would give his spiel, and I noticed that these cops, certain cops, would sit in the back of the class and they're constantly playing on their cell phones. So what's going on here? Well, then we got wise to it after the second time, and we showed up at this club, and there's like 3 or 4 60-ish women sitting at the bar, toothless. It's like, okay, where's the young girls at?
Yeah.
Young girls? Oh, sir, we don't have any young girls in here. This is a family place, you know. We were in here 2 days ago. Don't tell us that, you know, because we were in there doing undercover work, or his people were in there. And then we found out that these cops were tipping off the club owners who were traffickers, and then they would go over later the next day and pick up a big bundle of money, and they were happy. Well, you know, the average policeman in Philippines at that time maybe made $3,000 a year. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
So they would make their wages and then some in doing stuff like that, or in participating in the trafficking. And so that's what we were up against. And it took us a while to weed those guys out of being. We couldn't weed them out from the police department. That wasn't our job. But we weeded them out from going to classes. We tried to vet the people before they came in, and so that we had solid cops out there.
Well, who was handling the raids? I mean, was there a raid team?
Yeah,
was the police doing that? Or?
There was a raid team. It was Tate and the criminal police. I think they call them the NBI, National Investigative Bureau, or something like that.
Oh, so they had a federal force that was involved.
Yeah,
with
they
this.
were sort of like the Filipino FBI.
Oh, I see.
But they were, you know, for the whole nation. And they would provide guys, and the local police would also provide guys. And then Lois would hook up with our aftercare team. When we made the raid, we'd take the girls out. And we turn the girls over to them, and they would, you know, do their magic or whatever they had to do. You know, try to let them know that they're not going to jail and they've done nothing wrong, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And she'd help working with them sometimes. And then those guys, it took us a while, but after a while, I think there was money hanging over the head of the Filipinos, okay? The government from the United States, and I forget it was from the State Department. So they said, well, fine, if you're not going to do anything about trafficking, we're just going to cut your funds off. Well, that, you know, okay, you're going to cut our funds off and we'll start doing something. So they jumped in there, and eventually we ended up getting life sentences for these traffickers.
Really?
No parole.
Wow.
And so in closing down clubs, I don't know how many clubs that we were able to close down.
Oh, that's great.
I get all these patches, and these things are all the units that I trained, all the individual units.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they had the Providence police, they had they worked the ports, so they didn't have the slightest idea what to look for when it came to trafficking.
Right.
You know, so we trained them all up. They went back there, they started making arrests, stopped, you know, young girls from being trafficked right there in the ports. Same with the airport police, and then of course throughout the islands, different islands, and I taught you know, criminal investigations too, raids, how to handle evidence and stuff like that, what to do with it, and I set up all my mock-ups directed strictly to serious crimes, and trafficking always played a part in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So that, because when I went over there first, they gave me a pack of paperwork, and here's your classes, and I read them. It's like, this is a textbook. They said, yeah, this by Professor so-and-so, and he works at such and such a place, and he developed this course. I said, well, this is a fine course for a college.
Yeah.
I said, for me to teach, to stand up in there and read from like a textbook, I said, this isn't going to work. So I developed a whole training class.
Oh, is that right? Really?
I developed everything for them, and I got in a lot of trouble, really, because my lawyer, Andy Sarchenko, he said, I'm going to have to present it to the head office, but he said, go with it. and I went a couple classes, and it was working. And they said, well, you're not following this, that, and the other thing from this professor, and he's the expert, and blah. I said, you got to understand, you want me to teach these people? Yeah, and then I have to have something to teach them.
Yeah.
I can't read from a textbook or from paperwork.
Yeah. So 4 years you did that?
4 years.
So you guys were operating all over the Philippines?
Yes.
Like Manila, everywhere? Or?
Yeah, we went up and helped the Manila office out. They had their own set of investigators and so forth up there, but I was the main trainer, so I would go up there and train the units that are in and around Manila and wherever they would send them from. Sometimes they would have police personnel come in from different parts of the country.
So what time period was this?
This was 2006 through 2010.
Okay. Because I know there was a lot of turmoil going on around that time. I was reading. I mean, there was guerrilla activity, all kinds of coups going on, and kidnappings. Was there any evidence that they were being trafficked out of the Philippines?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a lot, and there was a lot of trafficking coming into the Philippines, as well as the Filipino girls and so forth, the kids. I mean, these girls are being... See, there's no accountability over there in the sense, if a child is born on the street, they don't have a birth certificate, so they're a nobody. So if someone steals them, like a trafficking company or whatever, steals them, nobody misses them, except maybe their parents, but they can't report them because they don't have a birth certificate. So that's what my wife was working with, and those type of children.
Wow. So there was actually children involved with this.
There was children. I mean, yeah. I mean, some of the Cambodia was the worst.
Really?
Give me a minute.
Yeah.
We were in Cambodia. We were in Phnom Penh, and we were doing our usual stuff and the undercover work. And we're Tate and I were a couple of businessmen. We wanted to have a party, but we needed some party favors. And so a guy who knew another guy said, I'll hook you up with them. And so we did, and then you go out and look at the product. Okay, fine. So they took us way out in the jungle, and we thought, this is it, man. They're gonna whack us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they came out to this clearing, and it was a big, like a warehouse, but it was sort of like an apartment building in the sense. And we went out there, and we're talking to the guys there, and they were street thugs, and they were the first people we had to get past before we could get inside. They would feel us out and search us and make sure we didn't have guns and radios and all this other stuff. And so we got through them, and we went inside, and this trafficker guy came out and asked us what we were looking for, and said, well, we're hosting a conference over here. And we made up some story we had made up a long time ago.
Yeah.
Before we went out. And I said, we just need some party favors. I said, we got a lot of people important clienteles that are coming over. Well, I can help you out. So he called all these kids down. Barry, most of these kids were coming down there. They had old ragged teddy bears in their arms. They were old. They were maybe 4 years old, 5 years old.
Really? Cambodia.
And it was like, we're looking at these, Tate and I are looking at these kids, just like, oh my gosh. I said, they're just children. He looks at me like, well, that's what you want, right? He says, let me give you an idea of what each of them has their specialties. And he went through all this stuff about who does what. And it's just like, I'm looking at these little girls and little boys, and I'm thinking, what kind of life do they have? And they looked like they were dead, okay? They were dead inside.
Yeah.
And Tate said, if I had a gun, he said, I'd shoot that guy right on the spot.
Yeah.
And so we had to leave, and that was the hardest part. Because we had to leave there. We said, well, we'll go back and talk to our people and see what they want to do. And that was something that has stuck with me forever. because it was like, I mean, there weren't just 5 or 6 kids. There was like tens. There's 30, 40 kids there, maybe more, and all ages. And we were leaving them, and we had no way to get them out of there.
Is that right? There was no jurisdiction, or
there was no jurisdiction. I mean, we could go to we went to the Cambodian police, but we have to do this, we have to do that, and their investigations are long and extensive, and they're just dragging their feet because somebody's greasing their palms, that type of thing.
Yeah. Jeez. So did you guys end up leaving with any so-called party favors, or?
No, we didn't.
So we just decided to leave.
We just wanted to see what was going on there, and we went back and talked to our people. We had an office there in Phnom Penh. Talked to them, and they basically said, I'm running this. It was an English guy who worked for the company. He said, I've been running into this all the time. He said, I can't save everybody. He said, I know how heartbreaking it is. It's just, and it's different in the sense you don't really get hardened by it, but you do build a shell.
Yeah.
And you can learn to deal with it and that sort of thing. Sort of like a homicide investigator, gets that little shell, but he's still bothered by what he sees.
Yeah.
And it was really, really tough.
Jeez. So what made you guys come back?
Basically, Lois's mom had gotten sick, and we weren't sure how long she was going to live. So she actually came back in April of 2010. My contract with the company was up at the end of October 2010. But I was going to extend it at the time, but the company was changing their format. They weren't doing the hands-on street stuff. They were going to internet. And so whole things were going to change and whatnot. And I don't know if I was affected by a lot of that stuff. And I just said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll finish out my contract, and I'll, get everybody else that's coming in behind me up and running, and you can have all my training materials and whatnot. I don't have a copyright on any of this. It's just police stuff.
Yeah.
And I said, you guys can run with it. I said, I can. And I hear periodically on a fairly regular basis from one of the guys we hired as an investigator.
Oh, is that right? Really?
And he tells me how it's going over there. He's
still in the game, huh?
Huh? Yeah, he's still in the game.
Wow.
Now I just heard from him a couple of weeks ago, and he said that he's applying for the NBI, the head, investigators. I haven't heard from him since then, so he might have got hired and he's off for training. I don't know, but
yeah, interesting. So you guys come back to the States, and at what point do you move to Wrightsville?
Pretty much right away. We lived in Cool Creek Apartments before we left.
Oh, okay.
Well, we went from our house over here to Cool Creek. We sold the house, and then she said, why don't we just go back in that area? I like Wrightsville. So we came back here, and we were looking for a house. We looked all over, and we ended up buying from the guy. She knew the guy who owned it.
Oh, okay.
And so he got us a deal. And
at what point were you like, I'm gonna run for mayor? I want to get into politics.
I was cajoled into that.
Oh, was that right? Really?
Yeah, I didn't. That's not something I went knocking on the door and saying, "Hey,
really?
I'm here and I'm bored and I want to be a mayor."
Yeah.
No, what happened was, I think it was Eric called me up, and he says, "Hey, we want to know if you want to be on council." I'm going, nah, don't care about politics. And so we went back and forth, and he just kept calling and kept calling. And I found out somebody had known him and had said something to him about me, and that's why he was calling me.
Okay.
And he says, look, he said, we got a lot more going on up here than just politics. He said, your background will solve our problem. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, I'm not fully at liberty to tell you, but, we need you. And I said, no, I'm just not interested. So I was helping a friend out in the gun shop and one day, and Eric and Mike came in. I said, when are you guys going to give up or what? And he said, no. He said, we want to know what you want to do. He said, the mayor's position is now open. There's a council position open. You can have either one of them. And they're talking to me, and I said, all right. I'll think about it. Eventually, we talked, and Lois and I talked, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll take the mayor's position. I said, not sure if I want to be on council or anything. I said, and I was thinking actually the mayor, things were flip-flopped. It was the mayor that was the lead guy, and the council was just, they were there.
Yeah.
But it's not in Wrightsville.
No.
It's opposite.
Yeah.
So because of what they told me they wanted me to do, and they said, no, but you'll have full control of the police department, and, you can do what needs to be done. So that's how I got into it. As you can see, it's all nice and sunny and warm. When we first got there, this is the Leaning Tower pizza we were up. And this was our thing here is Phil back in his little cubby hole that he dug out for us. And this guy right here is the one that he saved from freezing to death.
Oh, geez. Was this that place in Europe you were talking about? Oh, is that right?
This is in Portugal.
Is that you there?
Yeah, that's me. This is when I was working narcotics.
Oh, is that what that is?
I mentioned to you that we did a training thing over this is 30 years. And I actually need another one that should have 40 years. Okay. This is Korea, a patch we wore in Korea. This is obviously Berlin. This was the 716th MP Battalion in Vietnam. And of course, that's self-explanatory. Our wings. This is the Portuguese wings here. This is French commando. I went through French commando school. Didn't mention that, but anyway. That was in 72.